Welcome to another episode of Ecom Experiences, a podcast for e-commerce marketing leaders who want to grow and scale their brands faster. Join us as we interview some of the smartest brand founders and marketing leaders in the industry. Explore the lessons they learned, discover the keys to their success, and discuss what excites them most about the future.
Hi, it's Samir Balwani here, host of Ecom Experiences, where we talk to brand founders and marketing leaders about the experiences growing brands. This episode is brought to you by Query. Query is a paid media agency helping brands balance brand awareness and performance marketing to really drive predictable, profitable, and sustainable growth. To learn more about how we can help you, visit weareqry.com. Today, I'm really excited. I have Cam Aroz from Fellow. He's the Director of Growth. He's an awesome strategic marketer, super fun to talk to, has so much to share, great background and experience. I'm so excited to have you here today, Cam. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to chat.
Amazing. So Cam, I'm so excited to chat more and kind of run into some of this stuff. So why don't we get started? Just tell us about kind of the brand you work for, how you got there, what brought you into marketing and what's going on?
Totally. Yeah. So I work at Fellow. We sort of make coffee gear, provide a lot of guidance for sort of like how to use our coffee, mostly for specialty coffee. Like, for example, we make like kettles, grinders. We sell a lot of drinkware for that. That's sort of like, our core product, I guess you could say. I'm pretty new there, like maybe, like five months in or something like that. And I've been in growth for over a decade, and just sort of arrived there with the plan to sort of like help build out their growth program, basically. So that's sort of where I am and who I work for.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, I am a huge coffee fiend, and so Fellow has been a staple in this household. Everything from the grinders to the kettles, like this is flat out staples. So definitely worth checking it out. So Kim, tell me about, what's your favorite part of, we were chatting a little bit before, and tell me more about like what your favorite part about your role is. Cause as an agency owner, the brand side is, so distinct to the agency side. And there's just so much more that you guys have to handle and manage, and would love to just kind of get your thoughts on it. And what do you like about it? What's your favorite part?
Yeah. I mean, it's in my role as sort of the director of growth here, there's a lot of like managing different parts of our sort of like growth program. So, of course we advertise in Meta and Google and all those other places, right? But there's, managing affiliates, managing direct mail, managing sort of like, influencer relationships. And so, I think part of what I said earlier is like, the context switching. I think when I first sort of took on a director role a couple of years ago, that was kind of hard to get used to. And now I love it because you're constantly trying new things. You're constantly challenging yourself and figuring out, okay, once I have this done, now I can move on to this sort of other area, understand how to scale it, how to grow it, how to measure it, in ways that, like just drive value for the business.
Yeah, it's funny because when we were talking before, it was like, it's a puzzle. But then as I was thinking about it, it's kind of a puzzle where the picture is always changing. Like as soon as you fix one puzzle piece, it's like, oh, well, actually this other puzzle piece, and now we got to move it around. I'm so curious, like, how do you prioritize what gets, what goes first, what goes second?
Yeah. I mean, it's like thinking back to when I came in, right? It was like, what are the biggest movers for the business now, right?
Yeah.
And how do we sort of like, what needs support or help or nurturing, and then address that. And then once you have that, then it's like, okay, well, what do I think is going to be sort of like a big lever for us in the future? And that sort of then funnels into sort of like, okay, well, how much work is it going to take? Who do I have to partner with to make that happen? Is this feasible for a business of our size in the first place? And what additional resources do I need? And that sort of goes into a framework that I then sort of like boil down into basically a number of like, this is 1 through 20 or something like that, and kind of go in order. Being at a smaller company, we're not, we can't do everything, right? So we kind of have to figure out what are the things that are going to matter the most, and you take bets because if I had a crystal ball and I knew everything was going to play out perfectly, it'd be easy, right? But instead I have to sort of build these frameworks to understand what bet is most likely to pay off for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you said you think about everything as like a lever. I would be so curious around your thoughts around, do you feel, being at a smaller brand or a startup brand, like what does plateau look like for you? Like what does a channel reaching its limit look like for you? Or do you feel like that's not a problem you guys are dealing with yet? Or I guess we hear pretty regularly from brands like, we've hit a plateau, we just can't break through this. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, there's two ways I think about it. There's like on the marketing side and on the product side, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like it starts from like, what is your total addressable market or your TAM to begin with, right? And like, have you truly saturated that, right? Or is it just, if that's the case, then it's really a product expansion thing where you sort of have to figure out what products do I have to expand to new markets, or what's in my roadmap to be able to get the business from, this level to the next level in terms of revenue or sales or whatever your goals are. If you don't feel like you've saturated that market, then it could be something more like, okay, well, like, do we just need to make people more aware of us?
Yeah.
Are we fully sort of like taking advantage of the capabilities within that channel where, hey, we've reached everyone we can reach within Meta or Google or somewhere else? And that the way you get there is sort of you build like basically measurement to sort of understand where, at what point in the curve are you in your growth trajectory. And so it's the latter, the marketing problem is actually much easier to solve, right? Like it's hard work, and it's usually on the marketer to do that, but that's something that's more within your control than sort of like trying to build new products to expand to a different market, because that's something that's a total business problem.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, because like that's something that we deal with pretty regularly, is around like most brands have not hit their entire TAM, right? Yep. Like TAMs are pretty big for most people, and it's more around education and brand awareness, and then really answering the question of how are we doing that efficiently? Are the channels that I'm investing in actually efficient? So when you guys are looking at their brand awareness and measurement of that, how do you think about that? How are you guys justifying any prospecting or top of funnel investments from that perspective?
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking a lot for 2024. And it's like it's a really good question, because it's very hard to do, I think, with like a high degree of fidelity in terms of your measurement, right? So for example, how we're thinking about this in terms of like top of funnel or brand awareness is like, what do you want to run? If you need to grow awareness, what channels do you want to run on? What's your message going to be? And then how are you going to measure it? In which case, I'm basically trying to plan out like a longitudinal analysis of this, meaning, hey, we're going to run sort of a upper funnel awareness campaign that's sort of like always on, and understand what the outcomes look like in a 3-month time frame versus a 10-month time frame. Because I think there was a study that came out that sort of looked at, actually Meta talked about this. They looked at UI changes.
Next.
And when they changed the sort of like how the feed looks, right? And they looked the way they ran their experiments was really on like a 6 to 8 week time frame. And they saw a drop off in engagement, like poor responses to a UI change, and so they reverted. But they left a small percentage on, about a 5% treatment. And then they measured that longitudinally, and it turns out it actually performed better.
Amazing.
Used to it, right? And so I think part of like the measurement frameworks that we have in place right now are 6 to 8 weeks. They're very short term, right? So how do we think about like brand or something else like that, and looking at it at an outcome over 6 months or something like that? It takes a lot to set up. There's a lot of measurement involved in that, but like that's how I'm thinking about this from an awareness standpoint. Is like, you should be doing it, but you need to set up your systems appropriately so you can understand outcomes, because you can't go to the CFO and say, like, we did it just because we think we need to, right? You have to.
I'm glad you brought the CFO up, because I was going to say that, and it was like a 10-month time horizon is going to be a hard thing to sell through. But you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's funny because we talk about this with our clients a lot right now. Is category demand and brand and consumer demand is dropping. We hear about it all the time around consumer confidence into 2024. So less people shopping, more choices, because more people have started Shopify brands than ever before. Brand is going to become even more important, because you really got to stand out from the pack. So I love that you guys are thinking about brand and what that looks like, and I'm excited to kind of hear more about that. I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit into 2024. So 2023 was an interesting year for most people. So I know there's a lot of challenges that we're going to be dealing with in 2024. So what are the challenges that you're seeing, and kind of how are you looking at overcoming them?
Yeah. Part of this is what you were alluding to is things have just become much harder to predict, right?
Yeah.
Forecasting's become tougher. It is, it's always been a challenge, I think, to forecast. No one has a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But like a good example of this is economists have been saying a recession's coming for like the last 12 months, right? Like,
yeah,
that is, it would be if it did come, it'd be the most predicted recession in the history of recessions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just
remember, Cam, the R word is self-fulfilling. If you say it enough, it happens.
Yeah, sure. We have to be careful. But my point is, like, the economic data and the signals have become much harder to read. And that has made sort of like our job on the marketing side, on the finance side, the forecasting is much tougher, and there's just a ton of uncertainty around that market right now. That's one. And the other is like the fragmentation of the media landscape makes that even harder to predict once you move it down to a channel level. So if you're trying to do like a bottoms-up forecast or something like that, like that's going to be really hard, because not only is the macro picture very uncertain, but the micro one is as well. And that's become much more, it requires a lot more rigor than it ever has before.
I think some of that uncertainty is also just coming from shifting consumer behavior. I think some of it was people were really comfortable impulse buying things, and now products that are $100, which at a stage through COVID may have been an impulse purchase, someone just like going and be like, oh yeah, that looks really cool, I'll buy it, is now becoming a really considered purchase with a lot more research and a lot more touch points being required. So to your bottoms up plan, looking at things on a channel by channel basis is just not a realistic view anymore, because it's taking so many more touches for someone to finally purchase. And that's not just in paid media, but even across like your organic channels and your influencer channels, and just the total number of times someone needs to see the brand before they finally turn into something is becoming harder. And then even retaining, retention is getting harder too. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. So any other like major challenges outside of just general uncertainty that you guys are kind of hoping to tackle?
Yeah, I think the media fragmentation it is a big one, right? Like like what channels do we want to? A good example of this is there was like, I think, a Wall Street Journal article just the other day talking about advertising is dead, long live advertising. I think was the title.
Of course,
it's great. But like Netflix, Disney Plus, all these places are coming out with their own ads systems, right?
Yeah.
And that's just going to, not only is consumer behavior in terms of like how they interact with media, like just really, really fragmented. So the platforms are increasingly becoming that as well. So like what a brand of our size may be less of a problem as once you get to a brand of like when I was at Stitch Fix or Electronic Arts, right? All of a sudden you've got a million partners to work with, right? And how do you tie all of those together in a way that's cohesive is going to be, I think, challenging for a lot of brands.
I mean, as an agency, it's something that we're keeping a really close eye on, because we have to now manage more and more partner relationships than ever before. For a long time it was, hey, we got a Google rep and a Meta rep, and that was all we really needed. And now we've got a rep at every platform, Reddit,
Sure.
Netflix, Hulu, you name it, we've got to have someone there. And that's like another relationship that we have to manage, another channel that we have to keep an eye out on. So,
But totally, yeah. And just something to sort of like, like if it works out, right, that's just one more thing that's in your evergreen mix, right? Like that's a lot.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say about that, because there's also the creative lift of it, because each channel needs its own creative. It's the worst is when you're on TikTok and you see what was clearly a YouTube ad, and you're like, this just doesn't fit. What are you doing? And man, luxury brands are the worst of that. They always do it. And it's, there is this like creative lift that is starting to become. I'm curious about have you guys tried AI creative? Have you looked at generative AI for creative yet? Have you explored that route at all?
Not yet, not at our scale, but like it's something I think about a lot, especially as we move into these sort of like wherever, if the more channels there are, the more bespoke creative you will need to have, right?
Yeah.
And that is, at some point, like your design team can only get so big. And it becomes a real challenge to sort of scale that. And there are some partners out there that will help you do that. I think AI is super interesting and sort of the ability to sort of help brands scale in a meaningful way. So not something we've looked at, but something like that I'm keeping an eye on as we grow and as our needs become more complex.
Yeah, it's funny. My perspective on it is I'm cautiously optimistic, but I just feel like AI never, I don't want to say never because it can always be surprised, but the emotional aspect of creative is something I think AI will really struggle with. And it will feel very tactical versus like, it may be good for performance, right? Like for performance creative, maybe, but those like brand ads that you want to build a connection with, I think that's where AI will really struggle. And that's where we're seeing the largest of media fragmentation, to be honest. It's more on the top of funnel than it is on the bottom of funnel.
Yeah, totally.
So
and I mean, I'm not an AI expert, right? But like, you're probably, usually you're going to get something like if you put an input into AI, it's basically sourcing it from everything that's out there.
Yeah.
So you're going to get something probably pretty close to the mean, right?
Yeah.
And so standing out using that might be challenging. Because if that's your lever, right, it's probably not going to deviate that much from all of the things it's then sourcing its intake from.
Yeah, that's actually true. It's a good call out. So I'm curious, we talked about challenges. What are you most excited about for 2024? I guess, like, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah. Okay. This is gonna sound like a cop out, but it is like, honestly, like the fragmentation stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to sort of like the thing I like about sort of my role, right? And sort of switching context is I like challenges, right? And I don't think any sane person would be want to work in ads right now if they didn't like challenges, right? Like that is, it's frankly a really fast moving business that is not high stress, right? And so if you're looking for simplicity, this is not the one to work, right?
Yeah. Especially in e-com.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I like that things are getting increasingly complex because, one, I just find that exciting to think about, but two, like it becomes that puzzle, right? And I like working on those. I like thinking about the strategic elements of it, how we build our business and our marketing frameworks to sort of like address those problems. And then frankly, like if you do it well, you have an edge, right? Like that it's a moat.
For a little bit at least.
Yeah, until
people catch up.
I mean, it's sort of like investing, right? If you think about what like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, like they got good by doing a certain strategy, right? That elevated them above sort of like their peers, and then their peers figured out what they were doing, and then they caught up, right? It's sort of basically how hedge funds work, right?
Yep.
It's not that different from sort of like us.
No, it's not at all. That's actually how we position it. Like we tell people, as an agency, as a paid media agency, I'm no different than your hedge fund manager or financial planner, right? Like It's my role to find the channels and vehicles for which that you make the best returns. And so, I'm with you. Media fragmentation means more investment vehicles for us to explore and to try. And the interesting thing about it is also that, a lot of pushback that you'll get is, oh, there's media fragmentation, but it's all the same consumer base. But that's not true. It's actually opening up new consumers or people that are not using, different platforms. Meta and TikTok don't have as much of an overlap as people think they do, and they are incremental new audiences on these channels, and so it becomes important to be on all of these channels. And so yeah, I hear you on that one. It's definitely a really exciting and challenging thing all at once.
Totally. And I think I love the measurement part of like, it's like the closest you can get to do, science as a marketer, right? Is like thinking about sort of like measurement, building experiments to run that and making sure they're thoughtfully designed. And with more channels and with more sort of like fragmentation becomes more ability to run like just frankly fun, cool experiments. And that's what energizes me. It is obvious. It's one of the hardest things about what we do, but it's also like why I love doing what I do to begin with.
Yeah, that's super cool. All right. So last question for you. What advice would you give a new marketing director? So like, it's funny because you're just in your role for 5 months. Like just look back and just what happened that you would be like, man, you got to do this, this, and this.
I would say, I think if I had to pick just one thing, it would be just like understanding your measurement intimately. And mostly because like you're going to come in and you're going to have to sort of like rebuild things probably, or like take things over. And obviously an intense amount of scrutiny that comes with that. But understanding your measurement is the clearest way to prove value for your org, right? And if you can turn your marketing into a profit center rather than a cost center, like you can get buy-in for a lot of things. And that's, so like, I would say like have conversations with experts, learn what your options are, dig into each of them, and then sort of pick the tool that's right for your business. Like I have an obvious bias towards certain frameworks for measurement, right? But it's going to be highly dependent on sort of the business you're in. But
it's fine, Cam. You can give him a shout out here. It's fine.
Yeah,
you can give him a shout out.
I like Measure a lot.
Yeah,
they're my favorite. And in terms of sort of like the frameworks we think about incrementality as the means for that, and then marketing mix modeling for the longer term. But if you don't understand that, it's going to be really, really hard for you to go back to your head, like the same CFO conversation, right? Or the same CEO conversation. Those are really, really hard conversations to navigate if you don't understand those systems.
Yeah, and I think it's become even, I think you're exactly right, but it's even become harder, post GA4, and like the need for a third-party tool has never been more necessary than ever before. I know you guys are big Measured fans. We work with Rockerbox pretty regularly and Measured too. So we are fairly agnostic. But I think a multi-touch attribution incrementality testing, and then for long-term marketing mix modeling is key. Like, especially if you're spending, if you're spending $100K plus, you got to have at least a third-party tool. $100K a month plus, you got to have a third-party tool. You can't rely on in-platform metrics and last-click modeling just doesn't work anymore. So
no, I totally agree. And in GA, I mean, it all became much harder after iOS 14, right? When tracking became more difficult, and increasingly that's becoming harder and harder. Google will probably go cookieless sometime in the next year or two, right?
I mean, they're doing their 1% in January. I think this is going to be posted in January. So 1% of Chrome users will be cookieless. So they're definitely testing it and starting it, and that transition's going to happen. So
yeah, so I think, so you just you cannot, last click is just not an option anymore. it never really was, but like you could sort of like, it would get you close enough where you can maybe kind of fake it. Like now it's just not, it's not.
Yeah. We used to use it as indicator of growth, and like it's definitely directional and help give you guardrails. But that's not even good enough guardrails anymore. It's actually what we found is if you use last click as guardrails, you actually cap your ability to scale, because going back to the customer journey is changing. More people are doing product discovery on TikTok and Meta. They're not purchasing after they're seeing those ads from those channels, but if you don't have it, you don't get discovered to even begin with. So then what, your other channels all suffer. So definitely agree with you on that one. Amazing, Cam. Thank you so much for having us. So for everyone here, we've been talking to Cam from Fellow today. Cam, where can people learn more about you? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn. So maybe that it's just literally my first name and last name at LinkedIn.
We'll link it in the show notes for everyone, so they can find you easily. Cam, thank you so much for joining us and being here, and you always bring so much insights in, and I love our conversations. Looking forward to
I love talking with you too. This is so much fun. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, remember to subscribe so you'll be notified of new episodes. And if you know someone who would enjoy the show, don't forget to share and leave a review. It all helps us impact more brands. If you're looking to improve your paid media, go to weareqry.com and schedule a consultation. We're always happy to chat. See you for the next one.